Welcome to Ravens Holler. The clocks stopped first. Not all at once, not like a power outage, but like time itself hesitated and forgot the next second. I remember staring at the diner wall clock as the second hand ticked forward and didn't finish the movement. It just held there. A ceiling fan froze mid-turn. Outside, a truck sound stretched and snapped into silence. Then the woods answered. Not wind, not animals. Hundreds of hollow wooden knocks, spaced perfectly apart, like something deep in the trees was tapping its fingers against the world, trying to see if anyone was still awake. And the people around me, they didn't panic. They stood up, relieved. Like a show they'd been waiting all year to see had finally started. That's the moment I understood. I hadn't come back to Ravens Holler. I'd come back right on time. You never notice how the woods sound different once the fire burns low. Not quieter, just farther away. Like the night takes a step closer and everything else steps back. This story works best in a place like this, somewhere the dark can sit with us a while, because a long time ago, not far from places just like this, there was a town called Ravens Holler. Maps stopped printing it. GPS, they avoided. And locals will admit they've heard the name, but never directions. I know the way because I lived there once, and I wasn't supposed to remember. You see, when I was 6 years old, my parents packed our house in one night. No warning, no goodbye. My mother woke me up and told me we were going on a drive. My dad never checked the rearview mirror. Just stared ahead like the road behind us wasn't empty anymore. For years, they told me flooding forced us out. That story lasted until the envelope arrived. Inside was an old newspaper clipping. A boy lost in the woods outside Ravens Holler. Missing 3 days. Found unharmed. Only thing he said afterward, they told me to wait until the town wakes up again. Written under it in fresh ink, you left before it started. So that's why I went back. The trees lean over the asphalt like they've watched too many people come through. Not enough leaving. Right before town, there's a sign. Population 312. Except the numbers are worn so badly it reads, Popple 12. I should have turned around then, but memory has a pull stronger than fear. Yeah, diner light was on. 4 people sat inside with coffee going cold in their hands. The waitress, she polished the same glass again and again without ever looking at it. Every one of them watched me enter, not curious, expecting. I ordered coffee. She filled the cup until it spilled over the rim and onto the counter. Didn't react, just leaned toward me and asked quietly, "Do you remember leaving?" I said no. She nodded once. "You will tonight." 7:12 p.m. The clock stopped. And you already know what came after that. The silence, the woods knocking, the people standing all at once. They all walked outside together, and I followed. Every porch light in town glowed. Every front door was open. From the tree line came those patented sounds. Like the forest was speaking a language the town had practiced hearing. Families carried chairs and blankets toward the woods like they'd done it 100 times. I asked the waitress what was happening, and she told me gently, "They talk when the town goes still." I asked who they were. She pointed to the trees, and then I remembered. You see, when I was a child, my bedroom window faced those exact woods. I didn't know that memory was real until I stood there again, now as an adult, staring at the very same tree line. The shape of the branches felt familiar in a way memories usually don't. Not like remembering a picture, but like remembering a routine, something my body knew before my mind ever caught up. Because every few nights, town would come to a complete stop. Not sleep, just stop. No insects, no wind, no distant highway noise. Even dogs wouldn't bark. They'd just sit facing the forest like they were waiting for permission to exist again. And then, and only then, the knocking would begin. Slow at first. One, then another, then dozens, then hundreds, until the woods sounded like they were full of hollow bones tapping together in perfect rhythm. I used to think it was someone building something out there. Kids make simple explanations for complicated fear, but the adults never went to look. But they listened. Standing there again, I watched the townspeople reach the edge of the trees and set their chairs down in a wide half circle, all facing the dark between the trunks. No flashlights, no lanterns. They didn't want to see. They just wanted to hear. The knocking, it grew clear, not random. There was spacing between each series, almost like pauses in conversation. And every time it stopped, the people leaned forward slightly, waiting, anticipating, like they were expected to respond, but didn't know how yet. I asked the waitress really quiet, "How long has this been going on?" She answered without even looking at me, "Longer than the town." The air felt heavier the closer we stood to the trees, not humid, but dense. Like sound itself had weight there. Then the knocking changed. It wasn't just wood on wood anymore. There was a second tone underneath, softer, irregular, almost like footsteps pacing behind the tree line, keeping time with the pattern. Someone near the center of the group whispered, "They're closer tonight." One sounded scared. They sounded honored. And that's when I noticed the empty chairs. 12 of them placed at the front of the half circle, closer to the trees than anyone else was sitting. I asked why no one was using them. The waitress finally looked at me in the eyes. "Those aren't ours." Before I could ask more, the knocking stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Even the air pressure seemed to drop. My ears popped like right before a storm. And from somewhere inside the woods, a single knock came back. Not many, just one, and very close. Close enough that I could tell it didn't echo. Something had struck a tree only yards beyond the darkness. A man stood from the group. He was older, he was thin, and his hands trembling but determined. He walked toward and stopped beside the nearest empty chair. And no one, not one person, tried to stop him. The townspeople lowered their heads like they were witnessing a ceremony they'd seen many times before. He whispered something I couldn't hear, and then he knocked once on the trunk beside him. The sound did not match the others. His was dull. A live wood answering dead wood. For a long moment, nothing answered. Then 3 knocks came back, sharp and hollow. The man exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. He sat down in the empty chair. The waitress grabbed my arm before I could step forward. "You don't remember yet?" she said softly. "So you don't know why that matters?" "No, so tell me." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "They only take someone who used to live here." Oh, my stomach tightened. I told her I moved away when I was 6. She nodded slowly. Yes, not relief, but recognition. Another knock sounded, closer than ever before, and one of the empty chairs shifted slightly in the dirt, as if something brushed past it without touching it. Leaves rustled inward, not outward. Branches bent toward the circle, though there was no wind. And then, and only then, I heard it. Breathing, not from the crowd, from the tree line. Multiple breaths, trying to match the rhythm of the people sitting across from them. Learning how to breathe. A woman near the end of the semicircle began to cry quietly. No one comforted her. They left her all alone crying. They all kept facing forward. "Do they always take someone?" I whispered. The waitress took way too long to answer. "No," she said. "Sometimes they even return one." My skin went cold because the old newspaper clipping suddenly now made all the sense in the world. The boy hadn't survived the woods. He'd been sent back. The knocking resumed, faster now, impatient, overlapping patterns, like several conversations happening at once. The people didn't move, but you could feel tension spreading through them. Something was different tonight. Something unscheduled. The man in the chair at the front stiffened. Another knock sounded directly behind him. But there was no tree behind him. Only open space between the trunks. He turned slowly, like he already knew what he was going to see. And every porch light in Ravens Holler flickered at the same moment. The waitress whispered, "They've never, ever come this far before." And that's exactly when I felt it. A memory that wasn't a picture, it was more like a sensation. Small hands covering my ears, my mother holding me away from the window, my father counting knocks under his breath, crying while he did it. I grabbed the waitress. "I didn't just live here," I said. "Something happened to me here." She nodded. "Yes." The knocking stopped again, and from just beyond the first row of trees, someone knocked back using my childhood rhythm. 3 quick and 2 slow, and then just 1. Oh, I knew that pattern, because it was how I used to answer my bedroom wall when I heard them outside. The waitress stepped back from me. The people in the chairs turned, not towards the woods, but towards me. "You weren't the one who left," she said quietly. And from the darkness, something knocked, waiting for me to finish the conversation that I had started when I was a child. "The fire you're sitting beside right now, that's why we never camp near tree lines in this part of the state. Because sometimes the woods don't forget a language you spoke before you even understood it. And sometimes they wait for you to grow tall enough to answer properly. So if you wake tonight and hear knocking, slow and patient, don't match the rhythm. Not even by accident, because Ravens Holler isn't gone. It's just still waiting for its reply." And nobody spoke after that. But out there at the tree line, with the night pressing in and the fire popping between us, the memory settled into the place the way a bone slides back into socket, painful but correct. I just didn't live in Ravens Holler. but I participated. And as a kid, I thought it was a game. Every night the knocking started, I tapped back on the wall beside my bed. 3 quick, 2 slow, and then 1. I never, ever told my parents at first because, well, it felt like I had a friend outside. Something that knew I was awake when the rest of the town pretended not to be. The first time my father caught me doing it, he grabbed my hands so hard they bruised. Not angry, but terrified. He kept asking, "How long have you been answering? Tell me, how long?" I didn't understand why he cried after I told him, but I damn sure do now. Now back in the present, standing at the forest edge, the same rhythm came again from the dark. 3 quick, 2 slow, and 1. It was my exact rhythm. The townspeople leaned away from me in their chairs, not rudely, carefully, like you step back from a door someone else is about to open. The waitress whispered, "Oh, they remember you." I asked her, "What are they?" For the first time, she struggled to find words. They're what's left of the town before the town. Echoes that learned shape. You see, they can't stay where they are unless someone here keeps the pattern alive. Alive how? She nodded toward the empty chairs. By answering. The man who had sat in the front chair earlier has not moved since. His eyes, they stayed locked on the trees, breathing shallow and very uneven, like someone listening to somebody's giving instructions only he could hear. Another knock sounded directly beside him, but once again, nothing visible stood there. Only a depression in the dirt, slight but undeniable, like weight resting where air should be. His hand rose slowly, and then it dropped, and he refused to answer. The woods reacted immediately. The knocking scattered, sharp, overlapping, impatient, branches trembling through the air, even though the air was still. A smell rolled out of the darkness. Oh, it was awful. Rot, wet dog, swamp water, damp and old, like water sealed under a floor for many, many decades. The waitress grabbed my sleeve tighter. They don't like silence from someone who promised that they would speak. I never promised anything. She looked at me with something close to pity. You were 6, she said. They don't measure time the way that we do. The rhythm came again, this time much closer. So close, I felt it in my ribs instead of my ears. 3 quick, 2 slow, and then 1. And without thinking, the way your foot jerks when a doctor taps your knee, my fingers twitched against my leg. I stopped myself, but it was almost too late. The woods went perfectly still, like they'd noticed my movement. Every person around me held their breath at once, because they were waiting to see if I would finish my reply. I asked the waitress, what would happen if I did? She didn't hesitate this time. They know you still belong to their conversation. And if I don't? She looked toward the man in the front chair. They'll take someone who can't refuse. Right then the man gasped. Not loud, just a sudden intake of air, like he'd stepped into cold water. His shoulders, they jerked once. Then he relaxed, but too much. His breathing continued, but slower than human rhythm, even and practiced. He stood and walked forward into the trees without any resistance. And no one chased after him, and no one called out. The knocking softened. Now it was satisfied. would listen to his footsteps fade into wet leaves. A full minute passed. Then 2 sets of footsteps returned. Only 1 set matched his shoes. He emerged from the tree line and sat back in the chair, calmly, hands folded in his lap. His eyes reflected the porch lights wrong, catching brightness from angles that did not exist. He looked at the group, and he was smiling from ear to ear, almost grotesquely smiling. And not at anyone specifically, just in general. The waitress whispered, "Well, they sent one back." I asked what that meant. She did not answer, and I didn't need her to, because the man's breathing had stopped moving his chest. Yet the sound continued. And then the knocking began again. 3 quick, 2 slow, and 1. But this time, it didn't come from the woods. It came from the man's throat. Not a voice. Wood on wood, echoing from inside him. The crowd slowly stood and backed away. The returned man stayed seated, head tilting slightly, like he was waiting for me to be polite enough to finish our old conversation. And I realized something then. They hadn't been trying to take people. They'd been trying to learn how to stay. And I had taught them years ago how to speak back. So I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up a fallen branch and I snapped it across my knee. A sharp, messy break that ruined the rhythm entirely. Then I tossed the pieces deep into the trees and the pattern shattered. The knocking stopped mid-sequence, confused. The man's head jerked violently once, twice. Then he collapsed sideways, out of the chair, breathing returning in ragged human gasp. The woods grew distant again, not gone, just farther. Nobody, not one person thanked me. And they didn't need to. They just started folding chairs and heading home, relief heavy in their steps, like they'd survived a storm they never expected to end. The waitress, she stayed right beside me. "They'll try again. They always do, but you broke the sentence before it finished." I asked why they mailed the article. She gave a small smile. "Because you were the only one who ever spoke their language without meaning to." Oh, and I never, ever went back after that night. Hell no. But sometimes, usually around the hour where night feels the thickest, I wake up to a sound on my bedroom wall. Not loud, but careful and patient. 3 quick, 2 slow, and then 1. And then it waits for the last knock. So if you ever camp in deep woods and hear a pattern instead of a random noise, don't finish it. Don't complete it. Even if it feels familiar. Even if it feels like remembering something you forgot as a child. Because some conversations don't end when you walk away. They just wait for you to grow old enough to answer clearly.